Previously on Funny Science Fiction.
Which is a no-no. I mean, that's the last thing you want to do if you're a pool hustler. Because it's like a tell. I mean, oh, yeah, I'm not going to play this guy. He's got his own, what is he? What, are you kidding?
Hello and welcome to the Funny Science Fiction Podcast.
The podcast where we use Emperor Palpatine's cookie recipe to lure people to the dark side. Our guest today is Element 7. Now, Element is a fellow YouTube creator and a TikTok creator who just happens to be a massive Star Wars fan. And now I follow him on both YouTube and TikTok. And if you are a Star Wars fan, I strongly suggest that you check out Element 7's content. It's so good. There's no gatekeeping. It's fun. It's a lot of good information. And I can't stress enough, there's no gatekeeping. So, Element 7, thank you so much for being on the Funny Science Fiction Podcast.
Thank you guys so much for having me.
Yeah, we're excited about this. A couple months ago when I started following, I was like, oh, this guy's good. I like your content. And that's one of the reasons why I most wanted to have you on the show, is because I like your YouTube videos and what you talk about. You get into more lore than I'll ever remember. And your TikToks do the same, but it's never done in a way that I think is made to make you look like you're up here and everybody else is down here in your knowledge of Star Wars. And I've always thought that was really cool, because a lot of guys that I come across, when they start talking about Star Wars, is like, well, if you don't know who this character is, then you don't know anything. But I love the respect that you show for other fans' opinions. So thank you for being who you are.
Thank you for that sentiment. Well, I mean, like my entire goal was to just, keep everybody educated and let them know, or give them answers to the questions that they had. And
Yeah.
There's no way that they're going to learn if you're just like, oh, well, you should have known this,
So out of all the opinions that are thrown out there, which, good Lord, there's a lot in this day and age of the internet. Yeah. But of all the opinions that are thrown out there, which is one of the ones that you have the hardest time remaining civil about when you make a response, and why?
Ooh, it's most likely centered around the sequel trilogies, or sequel trilogy, primarily because a lot of the conversation and a lot of the discourse surrounding the sequel trilogy is based on misinformation and incorrect fact, or just not facts. And so while I'm certainly capable of engaging in debate and acknowledging the flaws and critiquing those films, when you bring forward an argument that is based on a lie or misinformation, that's just kind of rattling to my bones a little bit,
Yeah, I get that. I have no problem with people not liking the movies. If you don't like the movie, you don't like the movie. That doesn't mean you're not a Star Wars fan. It just means you didn't like that particular movie. There are things about The Last Jedi that bug the ever-living daylights out of me. And there's some stuff in Rise of Skywalker that bugs the ever-living daylights out of it. I still like the movies. Yeah. I still, I have some issues with character arcs and, some things like that. But, I have yet to find, out of, the 9 main Star Wars movies, I have yet to find one that's perfect in every way. If you only choose to look at, I've said this to a bunch of people, if you only choose to look at the original trilogy as the godsend movies and that they're perfect, they're not. You're looking at them through rose-colored glasses. You're not choosing to see the plot holes. You're not choosing to see the really bad dialogue in episode 4.
Yeah.
I mean, there's some major problems in a couple of these movies. And I think we had another guest on a little while back. His name is Frank Duran. He does the Warp Shelf podcast. The best movies are the ones where, George was the idea guy and somebody else took it and ran with it,
Yeah. Which is why Empire Strikes Back is probably my favorite, because it was George. Leah Brackett, I think, did the first draft, and then Kasdan kind of finished it off. But yeah, this is the fallacy that is rampant today with Star Wars. It's like, sure, I have a high regard for the original trilogy, and
absolutely, yeah,
subsequently for the prequel trilogy. I have a high regard for all of them, but that does not mean that I am shilling or that I am ignoring the flaws or
right.
I can't critique these movies. I have critiques of the sequel, but that doesn't mean that I'm going to push a narrative that's false, where Kathleen Kennedy has been fired more than 5 times, but she's still there.
Only 5?
Well, I mean, according
I
to the
didn't.
last time I looked, yeah.
You didn't check today. Okay, it was at
No.
least twice more today.
Yeah, but
Once in the morning, and then they gave her a job back at lunch, and then afterwards.
and she's connecting Favreau with the right people to enable volume, that space for the Mandalorian, but at the same time they're having tiffs and arguments in the background. It all doesn't make sense. But at the end of the day, the message that I want to propel forward is, critique these films, acknowledge their flaws, but at the end of the day, you have to move on and just start enjoying Star Wars again, because a lot of these people who argue against Rey and Rey Skywalker, I have to contend, like, how often do you think about Rey, this supposed character that you hate, versus the time you spend, lauding the characters you love?
Right.
One person could say, oh, I love Starkiller, I love Plo Koon, or any other character. Well, how much time do you spend loving that character versus the time you spend hating someone else?
Yeah, good point.
Speaking of like the Mandalorian and stuff, like Disney Plus has really set the Star Wars universe on fire, and with all these upcoming shows and stuff, what is one show that you're most looking forward to more than others out of these upcoming releases?
So we haven't had too many shows dedicated to exploring the dark side, and so Acolyte jumps out at me. It's at the tail end of the High Republic, which is in its infancy right now, and I'm absolutely loving this era. But having the chance to have a show that's primarily about a dark side user, has a lot of implications for lore. So, for a lore guy such as myself, which I'm equally excited about Ahsoka for that, because the logo implies that it's the world between worlds, and we're going to get more deep lore. And so Ahsoka from that point of view, and Acolyte from the dark sider point of view, because we've only gotten so much canonically from the dark side and the Sith religion and the people on that side. So yeah, I'm all in for Acolyte. I'm already like throwing out possibilities as to who it could be about. It could dovetail into Plagueis' story, but who is before that? And I'm just like, maybe they're gonna canonize Talon, or just bring in someone completely new.
All right. Now I know that you know how to go deep into Star Wars, and I love to know that what people got people into Star Wars. So because I look at it. Your love for Star Wars is deep, and that's one of the things that keeps me coming back to your videos, along with your knowledge of the depth of the lore. Now, I started in Star Wars when I was very young, watching the original trilogy. Han Solo was my guy, actually still is my guy. I love the fact that he's the reluctant, sarcastic hero. I mostly loved his sarcasm because I'm sarcastic. And The Empire Strikes Back is still my all-time favorite movie.
Same.
So I need to know what got you hooked. Where was the entry point into the Star Wars universe that made little Element 7 want to hang his hat there?
Well, I mean, it all started when my older brother, came home with the VHS for A New Hope, because I unfortunately was not, in that generation that grew up with the theatrical releases.
Mm-hmm.
So I watched the VHS, and, at a young age, you're kind of like, ooh, lasers and blasters and starships, and this is all really cool. And as I got older, when I rewatched it, I started clinging on to things that excited me, because I had grown up with, D&D and Final Fantasy and all of those fantasy RPGs. The thing that clung to me was its world building and it's the scalability of the universe, because I think it was after like maybe my 5th rewatch where I clung to Obi-Wan's depiction and explanation of the Force, and when he said that Alderaan was this moment where a million voices cried out and suddenly disappeared. And that's when I started to dive really deep into what the Force was, because I was just like, okay, at first you're amazed by the lightsaber, laser sword, and then Luke deflects a laser blast blinded, and so you're like, okay, so obviously something's happening here where their natural abilities are augmented, but then you start approaching the larger universe and how it's all connected, and how the force could be used, and I'm just like, this world is for me, and then I need to dive deeper. And then Empire Strikes Back came out, and we met Yoda,
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
Yoda exponentially scaled this world, like, so much that my interest in the Force was, I was 150% in from that moment on. How do we know the good from the bad? When you're common passive, moving rocks around, even though the Force isn't about lifting rocks, but it was just like this. It was just this door that opened wide, and you're like, oh yeah, the Force was, you could fight blinded, you could sense life and everything around you and stretch out with your feelings, but now you could applicably use this, as like a superhero would use their powers. And then they started talking about, like, the distinction between the light and the dark, and just the whole lore side of it just blew up. And that's when I dove straight in and never looked back.
I like it. That's good. Yeah, I'll be honest with you. I think that's probably the best answer I've gotten to that question. And because normally it's just like, well, I thought this movie was cool. Thanks. So I like the fact that there was more to it than just, I thought this movie was cool and had cool laser swords, that there was something that actually spoke to you. And I think that's awesome. So that's an awesome answer, man.
Thank you.
Yeah. So with the development of some of these newer these newer films of Star Wars themed stories in live action, it's really shown how we're able to develop these stories away from the movies. Um, and it's a great time to be a Star Wars fan because there's a lot of
Absolutely.
lore. There's a lot of like really exciting things happening in the universe of Star Wars, and but it's also given us like some new characters such as like Grogu, um, such formerly known as Baby Yoda. But what do you think the future holds for Baby Grogu, and when do you think we will see him again?
Well, let's address the elephant in the room. I don't think Grogu is going to die. I think he's visibly absent from the rise of Kylo Ren, if you've read the comics,
Mhm.
because it's planned that way. I think the lone wolf and cub that is the Mandalorian is not going to shift away from that dynamic. There's going to, because a lot of people will operate on unknown information, but as my Dyad Chaco likes to say, you know, there are two types of people: those who can extrapolate from missing information. And and so a lot of people are like looking at Grogu going off with Luke and saying, "Oh no, he died. He's not in his academy." I would contend that we just don't have all the information. I operate on the notion that Yoda's species stays in infancy physiologically in the first 5 decades, and then they reach full maturity from 50 to 100. And so by the time, the sequel trilogy happens, Grogu will have been maybe 75 or somewhere around there. He would be in his adolescence at most. And so I imagine him going off and he's like off world doing his Jedi trials, or before that time, he just misses the hell out of Din and just wants to, go back and be with him. So, I don't think he's going to die. I think it's purposeful that we don't see him in those comics. And
Right.
if you have any kind of like notion that Disney or Lucasfilm hadn't planned this out entirely before, in those comics we see Loden Greatstorm and Avar Kriss in holocrons and mentions of them as far back as when Rise of Kylo Ren came out, and we didn't even know about the High Republic initiative back then. So I think, you know, contrary to popular belief, if you don't know about something, that doesn't mean it's not being planned out. And so, yeah, I think Grogu has a lot yet to offer to the
Mhm.
Mandalorian. I think he's going to be coming back really quickly.
I think so as well. I'm hoping, and this is going to sound really corny, but I'm hoping that he has a Star Wars Episode 2 Attack of the Clones moment where Yoda whips out that lightsaber and just goes to town. And I'm hoping that he has one of those as well, because, as I've talked about in other episodes, I'm one of those guys who may or may not yell at the movie screen. And that was definitely a moment when I yelled at the movie screen when Yoda comes hobbling in with the cane and then whips out his little Yoda lightsaber and just, goes at Dooku. So, and I was like, yes.
And that's why I have like such an unpopular opinion that I enjoyed Attack of the Clones for that moment, because we had never seen him in action. He's just this decrepit old,
yes,
old man limping around, who seemingly has this abundant knowledge of the Force, has trained thousands of Jedi. And I'm just like, at the time watching Empire, I was like, thousands of Jedi. And then I saw him in Attack of the Clones, and he walked in, he hobbled in, and then he grabbed his lightsaber through the Force. I'm like, okay, no one had ever done that before, as theatrical as that was, or dramatic. And just, he dispels so many notions of capability with how you look in stature, like at the outset.
Yeah.
So like, don't judge a book by its cover. He's like the literal cover that you're judging, and then the contents of the book is him flipping around and defeating Dooku or pushing him back.
I share your uncommon opinion. I actually like Attack of the Clones. As long I may or may not skip over the sections of by the lakefront with the pseudo Shakespearean romanticized lines, and the force feeding of the pair to Padme. But if I can get past those parts, I think the rest of the movie is very solid. The only thing I wish out of that movie, and we talked to somebody last night actually about this, I wish that there had been more of the Genosian battle.
Mm-hmm.
I would like to have seen a little bit more of that, but I thought that was a good, solid move in the storyline to show Anakin's progression, and to show, we had to see somewhere how the clones began, and I thought that they did a really good job with that.
Absolutely. I mean, in that battle, all of the Padawans that had been Padawans at the time, except for Anakin and Barasafi, died. And that, I think it was a missed opportunity for them to kind of hammer down that moment as to how high stakes that battle was.
Yeah.
In the Jedi Order losing a lot of their numbers, only the masters and the knights, and even some knights and masters died. Coleman,
right.
I mean, we all know the stigma around that guy just kind of getting whopped by Django. But yeah, like, they lost a lot of people in that battle, and I thought, if they had ever released an extended version of that movie, that battle should definitely have like maybe 5 or 10 minutes more in it.
Agreed. Absolutely.
It was called Battlefront 2, wasn't
it? True.
Yes, that was your opportunity to see more of it.
So there are many stories in like the Legends section of Star Wars that is no longer canon for a variety of reasons, and some of these storylines have the possibility of being reintroduced as canon, such as some of these new shows on Disney. What's like one storyline that you're hoping comes back into canon?
Yeah, so we have to make the distinction that Legends was not of the level of G canon, as in following George Lucas's main continuity. So I think I'm preferable. Now, I haven't like read all of Legends, primarily because like the moment I started New Jedi Order, I wasn't feeling it. It's an unpopular opinion, but I'm more preferential to the Old Republic stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it largely has to do with my view that I actually shared the same view as George Lucas. I thought the story ended at episode 6 originally, and so exploring the earlier times with the Old Republic was just breathtaking to me, and that's why I love the High Republic initiative, because anything earlier than the Skywalker saga, just blank slate, you've got all of the room in the world to expand the universe, expand the galaxy, and
Yeah.
expand the Jedi and the Sith outside of the parameters of what we know in the original trilogy. And so I think the best thing, or the most appropriate story that they could bring into canon, and the easiest story they could bring into canon would be Darth Bane's story.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm also preferential to Satil Shan's Cold War story because she's my favorite Jedi. So I always have that. I always have to like sneak that into my answers. But Darth Bane is probably the most compelling and easier story because it's not really a lot of contradictions with Prime Canon.
Now, there's also been some hubbub about who's going to be the next big bad in the Star Wars universe. Now, lots of names are being tossed out there who people think it might be. And one of the names that I keep seeing coming up the most often is Ezra Bridger from Rebels. Some people feel that because Rebels leaves him off being lost in space with Thrawn, he was given the title of apprentice by Maul, whether Maul was feeling that that was a legit title, or more likely, I think he was just doing it to screw with Bridger and Kanan. And there's the Sith holocron that Bridger was clearly drawn to throughout Rebels. And one more thing, Bridger was also warned by Bendu that the merging of the Jedi and Sith hologram was going to show him things that could not be undone. So, and that bad things might happen. He did it anyway. So, what do you think of this theory that that's the next big bad in the Star Wars canon is going to be Ezra Bridger as a Sith Lord?
And as a part of this theory, it's attaching itself to like Ahsoka and that Mandalorian timeline as a big bad.
I'm assuming so. Yes, that's pretty much where it would have to be.
I mean, anytime we approach speculative information, I like to keep as much room as possible open because,
Sure,
of course, it is a possibility. It could very well happen. But at the same time, I'm on the side of the lore, and I don't think it makes a lot of sense, at least from a lore perspective, because I mean, canonically, Ezra did reject the dark side, which gave him access to the world between worlds.
yes,
And if we look at who he disappeared into the night, so to speak, with Thrawn, and if you read the Thrawn trilogy, you kind of get this notion that Thrawn he's not antagonistic without the Empire. He has his own motivations and he joins the Empire based on those motivations, but he's certainly not a bad person or a villain. And so I would argue that Thrawn takes Ezra under his wing, becomes a mentor figure, and teaches him about like battle tactics and reading people and being a better person, because everybody that studies under Thrawn, even within the Empire, like Commander Pharaoh and Eli Vanto, they became better people. They learned from him and they
and battle
became
tactics.
they became their own Thrawns within their own rights. And so I don't see his time with Thrawn turning into like an evil villain or a bad guy character. But again, like, of course, the caveat being it's also very possible because we don't know like all of the information.
Oh, sure. This is all speculation. Just, there's, I don't think that there's one name that's being tossed out there that you can look at and go, yep, that's definitely it. That's the guy that's going to do it. I mean, you can make a case for just about anybody being able to cross over that threshold, to be drawn to,
I mean, I would also throw out the name Quinlan Voss because he also survived Order 66. And in the Dark Disciple novel, he did turn to the dark side. Of course, that was all in the effort to assassinate Dooku. And he was, redeemed by Ventress, but he has that propensity. He has touched the dark side, and we don't know his story. So if they're looking for a big bad, they can always go with someone original. They can always go with Talon, who was the original apprentice to Maul. But yeah, I mean, I think I think they're better off going with an original, but if they're going to use Bridger in that way, I wouldn't be against it. I would if they sell it, if they sell the narrative in which he does turn, then I'm all for it.
I
Nice.
think it's going to deal with the packaging, how it's
Yeah.
how it's presented, how the story is built up, and as I've said to a couple other people, in Filoni and Favreau, I trust. So if those guys are directing the story, and from everything I've seen of that they do and how they do it, these guys are amazing story builders, and they package it properly. So if they can continue with that, I see no reason why, if it is Bridger, that it won't be done right, or if it is Voss, that it won't be done right. There's going to be a good storyline. They're going to show the arc of how we went from here, from over here to here. It's not going to be just like, okay, here's your big bad, enjoy.
Yeah. And a lot of these characters are Filoni's babies too, so he's going to take care of them for sure.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
So I
All
guess
right.
the other question is, how long do Gungans live?
That's not something I have in my holocron on demand. Maybe 200. I'm not sure.
Darth Jar Jar.
So our funny science fiction page, we see a lot of crossover memes. So what superhero, or sure, we could count Jedi in there as superheroes, but what superhero would you like to see thrown into another sci-fi universe?
That's interesting.
Who could make the jump?
I'd have to say, Han Solo could easily make the jump to Firefly. He's got that gunslinger, just cowboy-esque nature about him that he could just drop right into Mal's crew and just be like at odds with Mal and just have that
Right.
kind of
Reynolds
dynamic.
versus Solo.
Yeah.
I'd pay to see Nathan Fillion and Harrison Ford go at each other. Yeah,
That would be epic.
A sarcastic off, we'll call it.
And you can also bring the agent from Serenity into Star Wars. That I think.
Oh, there you go. Yeah,
interchangeable.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Good. All right. Now, so many people are up in arms about these. We mentioned this a moment ago, the sequel trilogy movies, and sure, they have their issues. But in order to have issues with a set of movies, you also have to like I said, have issue with the original trilogy as well. There's the plot holes, there's context issues, there's dialogue issues. If you're willing to be honest, they are wonderfully imperfect, perfect movies, in my opinion. So, but one of the biggest issues that surrounds the trilogy movies is with, of course, Rey. She's a Mary Sue. She's improperly trained. She's not a Skywalker. Out of all these issues, which one is the one that bothers you most because of how inaccurate the claim is?
Can I say all of them?
Yeah, no, you can address them all if you want. You can address one, you can address them all.
Yeah.
Dealer's choice. How about that?
I'll address them all.
Okay.
So the inconsistency here is what gives me pause the most, and I like to point to Jon Stewart's quote. It's political in nature, but it's not a political statement. It's be consistent with your outrage. So a lot of the people who have problems with Rey being a Mary Sue do not hold the same standard for Luke and Anakin. And if we're looking at all of them from a 1-to-1 kind of ratio, let's take her piloting skills. Anakin in The Phantom Menace just says, I'm a pilot, have been my whole life. And that is the only setup. And I'm okay with it. I'm okay with that. That he's a great pilot. He's the only human that can pod race because he's force sensitive. Luke says, I bullseye womp rats back in my T-16 at home, and then his friend says he's the best bush pilot. But that also means he's never left the planet. He's only been in terrestrial starships. And Rey, in her movie, she says, I've flown ships before and I never left the planet. So 1-to-1, all three of these protagonists have the same claim to piloting skills. And the only one out of those three that people question is Rey. And so that's a part of her claim to Mary Sue that is immediately dispelled because she has a moment where she sets up that she's flown before, as did all of the other protagonists. And
Okay.
even then she crashes into Nema Outpost at takeoff, and it's not until like the Force is kind of working through her that she has this moment of epic proportions where she maneuvers the Falcon um, in a way that is very, very Ace Pilot like. But at the same time, I also have to argue that the Millennium Falcon is just a regular YT-1300 light freighter. It is not a ship that requires an Ace Pilot.
Mhm.
And a lot of times when people say that she's a Mary Sue, they also in the same breath or in the same thought, they claim that um, she is too weak or she is not strong. She's not that strong. And this is like a lesser used opinion, but I just like to point out that kind of oxymoronic situation going on there. Um, Ray doesn't have training, so this is a huge thing because we have to assume this of our protagonists all the time, because Anakin is never shown training. Luke is never shown training besides the moments he had with Obi-Wan and the moments he had with Yoda. And so if we transfer it over to the sequels, Rey had moments with Luke, moments with Leia, and she's also shown studying the Jedi texts. Beyond or before that, we have a lot of people were pointing to the fact that, oh, she knew how to use a lightsaber, or she had combat skills that were never set up. And I have to point out that she had whopped marauders at the Nema outpost with her staff, which is a clear setup. It's not that you have to accept her skills after that point, but you have to recognize that that is a purposeful shot in the movie to establish that she's got fighting skills. And so while she's not a master duelist like Dooku in The Force Awakens, she's contending with someone who is A, not trying to kill her, B, wounded from a bowcaster which sends people flying through the air. It's literally a tank
Mhm.
weapon.
Yeah.
And we have several Chekhov's guns with the blood on the snow. It's like he's injured, he's wounded, and he's also not trying to kill her. So she didn't really outclass him. She was, for all intents and purposes, she was kind of not using the lightsaber well in that fight. And it all
No.
came down to Kylo losing, not Rey winning. And this is also even addressed in the movies. If you watch these movies with an unbiased lens, you will see that most of these arguments are addressed right there in the movie.
Mhm.
So for Rey winning with having not had a lightsaber, that is established in the Last Jedi when Snoke says, um, the deed of Kylo Ren killing his father, the deed splits your spirit to the bone, and you had been bested by a girl who had never held a lightsaber. This is a complaint that everyone had, but they missed Snoke addressing it. And
Mhm.
if you know that Kylo's spirit is split and killing his father tore him up, then you would know it's possible for him to have lost, especially against a girl who had just had the Force awakened in her. And so
Yeah.
that kind
Yep.
of proliferation will result in a lot of un unsensical things, or not commonly sensical things. And the Rey Skywalker thing, I don't spend too much time on that, because she says Rey Skywalker in the movie.
Mhm.
That's all you need to accept that she is Rey Skywalker.
Right.
I will say she is a Palpatine, but her name is Rey Skywalker, and that's just something you have to move on and accept.
I think that was more so when she said that. It was more about her saying, "This is the path I'm going to follow."
Mm-hmm.
Like,
Yeah, exactly.
not
She was
necessarily not where I'm coming from, but like, this is where I'm going.
Yeah. I took it as her paying homage to the Skywalkers, her paying homage to Leia and to Luke. More of an issue of respect for what they had done for her than her, because she's stealing their name. I've read that before. She's not stealing their name. Jesus, just just yeah. No, so I like all your answers, and I agree with all of them. The one that I had the biggest issue with is that she's improperly trained.
Yeah, I mean,
she's improperly trained. She just picked up a lightsaber. She could do this. She could do that. I honestly think there is more time. I haven't sat down and done the camera work here, so abide me this moment if I'm inaccurate in my statement. But I would bet that there is more on-screen time of her being trained than Luke.
Yes, that is accurate.
And there's probably and probably Anakin as well, because Anakin, we see him walking around with Obi in the movies, but there's really, you don't see him going through the trials. You don't see him going through saber techniques. You don't see him going through, not even with, the Yoda type of stuff, let me run you through the forest on your back like a backpack. There's none of that. It's just Anakin's but no, everybody accepts that. No, because he's Anakin.
Yeah, he was the chosen one. That's the fallback answer. And you're right. We don't see it. Like Anakin goes from a youngling all the way to Padawan with no on-screen training, and then he goes on to be a knight with no on-screen training. And the only thing we have to go off of is one line: "My powers have doubled since the last we met, Count," and then we just accept it.
Right, and we all moved on. Oh, good, he's Anakin. He's going to be Vader. Yay!
and for Luke, he stopped his training short, and we do have a canon answer in from a certain point of view that it was just a few weeks, and so he stopped his training short, and then the next time we see him, he's a fully fledged knight, saving Han from Jabba's palace, and the reception to that is awesome. He trained. Apparently,
oh, cool.
Yeah. And so what we see of Rey is just not enough. And that goes back to my argument that, you be consistent with your outrage, because she does in fact have more on-screen training than the previous protagonists.
No, I think that's great. I think it's an awesome quote, by the way.
I was thinking back to the piloting. There was a statement made in the Clone Wars cartoon from Ahsoka where she's razzing Anakin because she's like, it seems like every time you fly, you crash a ship, and
oh yeah, I remember that. So hey, but at least he was a good, solid pilot. So, all right. So one more silly question for you before we wrap this up and we take you into our little fun quiz that we have set up for you. It'll be good. It's all kinds of fun. All right. So let's imagine that Element 7's blood is just chocked full of midichlorians. You are a Force-sensitive youngling with a choice to make. Before lies you a Sith holocron and a Jedi holocron. Which path does little Element choose?
Well, that's an easy one for me. A Jedi holocron.
Okay.
I love Yoda, and I love the Jedi Order for all of its shortcomings, especially now that we have the High Republic and more of a recontextualization of the Order and how they were supposed to be. And I acknowledge that Yoda was part of the failure in the fall of the Jedi. But again, just the way he approaches teaching and his abstract nature of just speaking in abstraction versus telling you exactly what you need to know, making you more susceptible to learning it yourself and it kind of latching on and catching on. I don't have any kind of inklings or any wants for absolute power and strength and passion. Well, I have passion, but it doesn't control me. So yeah.
A small part of me was hoping that you would say that it was the Sith, because I was going to see if you were going to take one of those cool spinner blades like the Inquisitors.
Man.
But past that, no, I get what you're saying. That makes sense to me. But maybe just get one of those cool spinner blades for Jedi. So
I would love one.
Yeah,
if anyone's watching that fabricates lightsabers, let me know.
We might be able to hook you up. We know a couple people. All right.
cool.
So, all right. So we have a quiz for you. Now, what we like to do is we like to run through this with every one of our guests at the end of the show. And we try to make the quiz around something that they should mostly know about. So for you, of course, we picked a Battlestar Galactica quiz. And no, I'm kidding. It's a Star Wars quiz. So we have 5 questions for you. If you get 3 of them right, we're going to send you this mug that looks just like this. Talks about the red shirt, widows, and orphans, just like we talked about.
Oh, nice.
Okay. So if you get that, and it's even got I'll flip it around for you. Even has our cool little logo right there on the back. Okay. If you get 4 questions right, I am going to make sure that Drayton Allen, who started our group and wrote this really cool book, Custodians of the Cosmos, we'll send you that as well, the coffee mug and the book, and we'll make sure that Drayton vandalizes it for you and signs it. Okay.
Nice.
So, and that's where we get the Red Shirts, Widows, and Orphans Fund from. Is from that book. It's all about a guy who wanted to join the Starfleet, couldn't, washed out, so he joined as a janitor. So now he boldly cleans up for those who boldly just went. Yeah,
to boldly go where they boldly went.
Yes. So
Interesting.
yeah. Now on the flip side, should you epically fail this and get less than 3 correct, so if you only get 2 questions right, we get to make a meme out of you. You accept?
I absolutely do. Yes.
All right. Very good. All right, Nick, take us away.
So the first battle of the Clone Wars was the Battle of Naboo, Utapau, or Geonosis.
The first battle of the Clone Wars was Christophsis, but it would have to be Geonosis. Because that was like the battle that kicked it off. But if you were to say the battle that took place during, then it would be Christophsis. But I'll go with Geonosis.
All right.
Okay. And I forgot to, yeah, exactly. And I forgot to tell you that this is all multiple choice. So we try to make it a little bit easier. So, all right. So 1 question right. All right. So in the new Jedi Order series, I like how the fan immediately goes to the face. Son of a. All right. So in the new Jedi Order series, which species of aliens invaded the galaxy? Was it the Bith? Was it the Rhodians? Or was it the Yuzong Vong?
That was the Yuuzhan Vong.
All right. See, you're not so bad at that. You knew it.
I mean, I facepalm because that's the obvious story that I admittedly avoided.
And the best part is I had no knowledge of that before I wrote that question. So, all right, that makes me happy. Okay.
Almost all the Mandalorians were killed by the Jedi in the Battle of Mandalore, Gillidaran, or Naboo. I may have.
Well, this was called the Great Mandalorian War, so I'd have to go with Mandalore.
It was Galad. I might be pronouncing it wrong. Galadran.
I don't think you're wrong. I don't know that you're right either. So either way, but it's the one that starts with the G.
Yes.
So, all right. So 2 and 1. All right. So the special blue markings on Captain Rex's helmet right above his visor are called Jag eyes, Vigatos, or Rancor teeth.
Oh, I'm admittedly not a clone person.
Yes.
What were the choices again?
Oh, you're gonna make me say these names again. All right, so Jag eyes, Vigatos, or Rancor teeth.
I'll say the Gatos.
No, it's the Jag eyes. Jag eyes. I might have said that improperly, but it's 2 separate words. Jag and then eyes.
When we interviewed Captain Rex, didn't he bring that up to us?
Yeah, actually.
Oh.
Yeah. Well, one of our very first interview actually was with a guy who is with the 501st. And he cosplays Captain Rex in one of the sweetest Captain Rex get-ups you'll ever see. It's screen accurate in every way. It's pretty awesome. So, all right. So we are 2 and 2.
All right.
This is for the cup.
Or the meme.
Or the cup or the meme.
Senator Mon Mothma was from what planet?
Oh dear.
Lowfall, Tatooine, or Chandrila?
Chandrilla is the answer.
Yes, it is. All
Yes,
right.
it is.
You, sir, have earned yourself a coffee cup.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right. We might even still send you a book. You know, who knows? We'll see how giving.
I'd
Drake
appreciate
is
it.
feeling.
I would love to read that book.
I'm sure he'll make sure you get one.
Well, Element 7, thank you so much for joining us today. Where can people go to find out more about you and your other works?
Well, thank you again for having me. This was a lot of fun. When I had a blast answering the silly questions. You can find me primarily on TikTok _element7_. I do have a link tree in my bio there, so you can find all of my socials. Unfortunately, I could not secure Element 7 across all social media, so it's something that I contend with on a daily basis. It's like, hey, my Twitter is Element7X spelled out, and my YouTube is Element7. But if you were to use, the address, it would be youtube.com/Element7S. And yeah, those are the stuff you can find me on. Instagram, Element X Style. It's so confusing. But yeah, you can find me on there.
I see some hostile corporate takeovers here shortly.
If
Some
only.
buyouts.
Well, we will be sure to place those in our description so that way people can find you and your other works.
And we want everybody to remember that subscribing is the single most important thing that you can do for not only the Funny Science Fiction podcast, to make sure that we get awesome guests like Element 7 here and funny moments for you to listen to. But it also helps if you subscribe to Element 7's work on YouTube and TikTok and all these other places that we're going to provide you the links for. We want to make sure that not only that you're getting content from us, but we bring these guys onto our show because we want you to know that these are the guys that you need to be following and checking out as well. There's some awesome content awaiting for you on both his YouTube and TikTok channels. So make sure you follow him there. So, and as a reminder, if you're not happy with the content of our videos, well, feel free to report what went afoul in this episode to the Rebels Phoenix Squadron, and they're going to blast it out of hyperspace, never to be seen again.
Well, I'm definitely getting blasted.
I didn't want to say it out loud, Nick, but yeah. I'll talk about the guy who used to be my co-host.
Well, thanks again, Element 7. It was great to have you here.
Yeah,
Thank
absolutely.
you again also for having me. This was a lot of fun.
Excellent. We
And
enjoyed
I
it.
always just love, it doesn't really matter who I'm speaking with. If we're speaking about Star Wars and positively, it's always a great time,
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely agreed. Absolutely agreed. All right, guys, that's going to wrap us up. Thanks for watching. Have a good night.
Our show is brought to you by one of our charity sponsors, the Red Shirt Widows and Orphans Fund. Imagine the comfort you'll give Red Shirt crewman number 11. He'll know that when he puts on that red shirt and gets murdered on the forest moon of Endor by two aggressive drum-playing Ewoks, 14 minutes into another crossover episode that will never happen, he will have the peace of mind that he did not leave his family destitute and without hope. Because the Red Shirt Widows and Orphans Fund has his back, and his teddy bear shredded red shirt.
On behalf of the rest of the hosts of Funny Science Fiction, we'd like to thank you for listening to this episode. If you'd like to be a guest on one of our future episodes, please contact us by means of our Facebook group, Funny Science Fiction. You can find us on Twitter or Instagram using the handle @FunnySci-Fi, or you can go to DraytonAllen.com and click the Contact Me link at the bottom of the page. Thanks again. Hope you enjoyed the episode.
Copyright 2020 by Drayton Allen. Original music by Jordan Michaels. Reference to any specific product or entity mentioned in this podcast does not constitute an endorsement or recommendation of or by Funny Science Fiction or its sponsors. The views expressed by guests are their own, and their appearance on the program does not imply an endorsement of them or any entity they represent. If you have questions about this disclaimer, please contact us via email at DraytonAllen@DraytonAllen.com.